Hi everyone, I'm here with Nelson Lau from Archwick, a company that's been making some waves recently on the airsoft scene, and they've very graciously agreed to let me interview them. So, Nelson, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Tom. How are you?
I'm all right. It's 11 o'clock in the morning for me, and it's somewhat later for you, because Nelson is coming to us from Taiwan, which is quite amazing, really. Okay, well, let's ask the first question, Nelson. So, I
Okay.
mean, Archwick, I don't know or not, but they seem, certainly from a UK perspective, seem to have just popped up in the last year or so with the Mk13.
Right.
What's the company's background?
Basically, me and my partner Ray, I do basically all the sales and marketing and make deals, and he's the technical guy. We've actually both been involved in airsoft for a very long time. Um, I started playing when I was, I don't know, 16.
Okay.
Um, and I'm now 43 going on 44, so it's a lot of years. And I'm actually from, it's complicated. I'm from Canada, but originally born in Hong Kong.
Okay.
And in Vancouver, where I lived, I was one of the earliest players of airsoft. So, this is before Facebook, before social media. Back then, we're still using forums. So
Yeah. Yeah.
basically, a bunch of guys who had guns wanted to get together and play airsoft, and grew into a club. And then I started importing and selling because, like I said, I'm from Hong Kong, so all the airsoft stuff was from Hong Kong, and I built a business out of it. Eventually, did some movie armoring work and modified guns and all that.
Right. Okay. Okay.
Um, so yeah, so that's kind of how I started. This is from way back, and I moved to Taiwan in 2003. Started a couple businesses, and then I was into MagFit paintball for about 10 years. I was working with a company called Milsig, and a couple of things happened with that business and that industry, and I decided to come back to airsoft, so to speak, but as a manufacturer. So Ray, on the other hand, he's a little bit younger than me, but he's been playing airsoft since he was in high school, and he's got an engineering background, and he did a lot of freelance work. He worked for a couple other airsoft companies, and then he came out
Okay.
on his own as a designer. And then I knew him from my previous work. He actually did a couple projects for me, and then we became great friends. And then we just decided to come out and start our own company after doing a couple paintball and airsoft projects together. Um, I don't have a permission per se to talk about some of this past work. I don't know any NDAs that he have signed, but I could tell you in openly now that he did a couple guns that are pretty famous. Um, Recently, he did a gas blowback SMG for another company. That was actually his last project before he partnered up with me. I'll just say that it's recently been released. You count how many SMGs have been
Yep.
released
Yep.
this year, and I'll leave it as that. And then, so so Archwick, honestly, it's a relatively new company. We actually met up with ASG. We approached them about the Mk13.
Yep.
And they have a relationship with Ray previously, so that they knew each other
Yeah.
before.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's not like we just randomly, decided to take a gun that we wanted to do and they picked it up. So there was a lot of background work done before we actually became Archwick.
Why did you decide to go with the Mk13 Mod 7 in the first place? I think some.
That's a great question. We knew as a new company that we had to pick a niche to go into. Most companies would actually do accessories for a long time before they tackle a
Yeah.
gun.
Yeah.
But with us, it's kind of different because of our technical background and our experiences. And, we had the financials in place. We could afford to do a gun right off the bat. A lot of companies, they can't. So that's a blessing. And we just kind of looked into various niches in the airsoft world, and picked something that we're interested in ourselves, and we thought we could go into and create a name for ourselves. And we kind of decided to go into the mid high end sniper gun market, spring sniper gun. And I think it was from a previous project that Ray had done with ASG that they talked about the AI brand and how there hasn't been a lot of guns done for that brand. ASG has a bunch of trademarks and whatnot under their umbrella. And some, like for example, ZZ, it's, they put up a lot of products from ZZ, but they haven't had really much of anything from AI. I think their last rifle was like an L96 clone, so to speak. And then that was it. And then nothing else prior to that. And then their last kind of high-end rifle, I think, was the Ashbury rifle, which is not a very famous rifle, but nevertheless, it was one of their licenses and they did it. And it just coincided with, when we were doing our research, we wanted to do something that a real military unit is actually deploying. And then, all the Navy SEAL stuff, all the SOCOM stuff, that's all been done. And then it's like, there's, the U.S. Marines Mk13 series, right? Mod 0, and then the more famous ones are like 5. 5 is actually another AI gun. And then naturally, we decided to do the Mod 7, which was a more recent adopted gun, and then also AI. And we just fell in love with it, the shape of it, the history, and then one thing led to another. That's the direction we decided to go. We built the prototype, and we showed it to ASG, and they loved it, and then they picked up the line. So the rest is kind of history,
So one thing I really noticed about the Mk13 was kind of the build quality and the standard that you'd made it to. What was the reasonings behind going into that level of production quality for Archwick?
Okay, well, recently in the kind of sniper realm, you have companies like Norwich, that's how you pronounce it.
Yep.
He started, putting out some middle and higher end rifles with a lot of built-in parts, and I think that was the trend that we saw. A lot of people, they end up buying like a cheap Chinese-made gun, and then they dump hundreds of dollars or even $1,000 into to build it up. But at the end of the day, when you start with a lower end gun cosmetically, and a lot of things are not done to the right detail, so you end up with $1,000 gun, but aesthetically it's not beautiful, and it doesn't have the build quality that one would expect for that kind of money that you put into something. So we decided that to establish ourselves as a real player in this industry, to give a lot of value to the end user. So let's just throw in everything in the kitchen sink kind of thing. And if you come out with a gun that you open the box and you could use without having to tinker with it, I think the user ends up with a better experience, right? And obviously that kind of worked out well for us because, counting our blessings and whatnot, the gun has been very positively reviewed, and I think we were able to achieve our goal.
Yes, I think absolutely. I was one of the first people in Europe to use it, and it was immediately obvious just how nice it was.
Well, thank you for your positive feedback.
We've talked in the kind of pre-show very briefly about my background, and I think my viewers know. But I was a product design engineer, and I do get it, and I'm quite passionate about real materials to a sensible degree, and airsoft replicas feeling like replicas of firearms rather than toys. The thing is, when we were designing the gun, we actually went out and bought several real AI chassis. So it's a lot of the companies that design airsoft guns, they never get to touch the real thing. So they just download a bunch of pictures on the internet, and they just kind of draft it and scan it and try to make it as close as possible without actually seeing the real thing. So I think when you don't get to see and play with and touch the real thing, your product is lacking in detail in a way. So, I mean, for example, when we're looking at pictures,
you don't see the kind of there are some things on the real gun that actually is not done as well. Like
I'm
some
sure.
of the plastics, for example, they don't fit as well as actually what we put out. It's no knocking to AI, but it is just reality. Oftentimes, I have a background with real guns. I played and owned a lot of real guns in my time in Canada, and oftentimes real gun quality isn't as good as airsoft because they're basically mass producing in a different scale. And when you think about it, what they're designed for, you have to build in a lot of ruggedness. So there's a lot of extra tolerances built in. So for example, with the plastic pieces, I think it's probably because they're going to use it in a very cold environment. Mm-hmm. And you got to allow some shrinkage and expansion. So if you make everything exactly very tight fitting, they'll probably bend out of shape when you actually go and use it. And obviously in a real firearm with a 300 Win Mag, it's a very powerful round. The amount of recoil that they're dealing with it's nothing like what we're basically putting on an airsoft gun.
Yeah, so it's a funny discussion because I've had it with several people about people moaning about seam lines on plastic parts in airsoft, and you're like, have you ever handled or seen a real part?
Right.
And I agree. I mean, I think quite often the materials are better in real guns, but I agree with you completely that the production standards or the finishing quality often isn't as good. But yeah, it's just sometimes it just makes me laugh the kind of the standards that airsofters hold airsoft replicas to, when actually the real ones, as you've just talked about, maybe don't have the same tolerances for very good reasons.
Well, I think as airsofters we're a little bit spoiled because airsoft manufacturers are quite amazing in the amount of detail they could put in to a product, considering the prices they're actually selling their products for.
Yeah.
So like a real Mk13 Mod 7, just the chassis itself, it's like $1,200. So the chassis itself costs more than our entire gun. And, I could tell you that we don't mill all the metal parts out of a solid block of aluminum. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to sell it for what we sell it for. But we try to create that kind of feel, that sensation, without breaking the bank, so to speak. And so when we got the stock, the way the thing felt when you folded it, when you extended the stock, that was rock solid. So we had to create the same sensation, and there is the odd guy out there who's a real sniper, real gun enthusiast, and they'll buy one of ours and take the real chassis and say, well, damn, this thing is close to the real thing. We want to be able to say that we did it.
Yeah.
Right.
So you've released the Mk13. In general, how has that been reacted to by the airsoft community?
Quite well. There's a lot of bickering at first. People see the price and like, wow, holy crap, it's $600 US. But then people who bought it and then they break it down and test it and say, okay, well, if you consider what you're getting out of the box and what money you don't have to spend, and it's officially licensed, and it's aesthetically pleasing. You can't build an Mk13 from something you buy from China. I'm sorry, you can't. I think there's type of clone that just it sort of looks like it, but it's not quite the same. But then you realize it's actually very far off, right? So to go back to the question, I'm kind of wandered off a bit. The gun was actually released in Asia before ASG got them over in Europe and North America. It wasn't actually planned that way. It was planned to be a simultaneous release. But because of COVID, they were locked down. And we're like, well, we have to start selling and make money because we're already paying rent. We already did all this. And ASG was actually very gracious about it. They're like, yeah, this is not your fault. This happened. And we want to be back at work and, playing airsoft and whatnot too. So we actually got a 6-month head start before them. And then they were sold in Hong Kong, in Korea, in Taiwan, and Japan. And they were very well received. Like I could say in real confidence that probably 95% of people who bought them were very happy. And then the 5% that weren't as happy was mostly because of the complaint with the magazine.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you ask me about that later, but It was actually a choice that we made consciously when we decided to do this. Obviously, you've already played with it. We decided to use a VSR-based system just because it's the most popular system in the world. And it just so happens that where the foregrip is where a VSR 10 magazine has to go to feed into the hop up. So
yep.
That's the compromise. But other than that, everybody's happy with it.
Are there any aspects of the Mk13 design you would change if you were to do the project again? We've already spoken about the VSR compatibility thing and the magazine placement. Is there anything else you would change? Just
one of the feedbacks that we've got now is that the two versions we offer, obviously the real gun is meant to shoot somebody out to over a mile. So the Mod 7, the real Mod 7, it's a big long ass rifle. So it's not the most maneuverable thing out there. And then the compact, the C version, we actually got the idea from Surgeon Rifles. They're a very successful and famous brand in the States. They actually make competition rifles. And they just happened to make one using an AI chassis, which is a lot shorter. So off the top of my head, I think the long version has got like a 500 plus millimeter barrel. Yep. And then the C is 300. So it's basically, this long and then this long. And then everybody's like, well, can you make something in between? So we didn't think about that at the time. But I think it's something that we will explore. We want to make an outer barrel that's exactly VSR length, which is around 430. So basically come in with the in-between model. As you saw probably in MOA this year, we talked about the SPR 300. I could actually call it that now because we actually got the licensing, official licensing.
So this was previously known as the SXX 300, which you were showing at MOA.
Yeah, I just basically used the X to kind of block off PR, but everybody figured it out. But anyway, one of the more exciting things about that project is that it's got our dual mag system. That's something new. So basically, a quick introduction, you could use a VSR magazine or you could use a magazine in the real gun magazine location, which actually functions.
Further back towards the trigger guard, right?
Well, and then there's a kind of like a bridge that feeds up to it. So you got to prime it because there's going to be like 20 rounds trapped in the bridge device. Reload the mag, but you can use it that way. So I'm giving customers a choice. When we first set out to do the Mk13, there were some engineering issues with the chassis that we couldn't do that design. Whereas the SPR, because of its shape, allows us more space to do that. We're still kind of tinkering with the Mk13 chassis. I'm hoping that in a future model, we might be able to adapt the same system over. But I think that's it's not something that we could consider doing right now because it's just so much change to the tool. And the Mk13, touch wood, it's actually selling very well right now. So the factory guys are in the middle of building another run right now. So I can't really go offline and change the tooling.
Sure.
And then, but it's something else to consider. And other thing that kind of follow up, the chassis used in the Mk13 is actually an earlier version of the AI chassis. So they have a later version now that's got a cooler stock, skeletonized with all the adjustments and all that. So if you guys kind of look it up, there's a pre-2014 stock and a post-2014 stock. So we want to adapt that. But if we put that into the gun, it will no longer be the Mk13 Mod 7 because that one uses the older version. But having said that, there's a German version, G22. And then obviously to you guys over in the UK, you guys have adapted it, I believe is the L114A4. Oh, sorry, 115A4, if I remember correctly.
115 is a 338, yeah.
But that actually, I think it's actually about the same size as the real chassis. Because the 308 round and the 300, it's just longer round. The magazine, it's a little longer. But the actual metal part of the chassis itself, because the real gun, it's a milled aluminum solid piece that actually has the same dimensions. They just drilled a bigger hole for the mag well. So I think it's something that we could probably branch into. But it's a little bit of an oddball gun because the Mk13, the Americans do it a different way where they have a bunch of different parts made by a bunch of different manufacturers,
Yes.
and you just kind of slap everything in place. Whereas I believe the G22 and the L115 are basically complete rifles from AI. So I think they are basically just a rebatch AX338. You sniper gurus out there could tell me if I'm right or wrong. I have started to do my research on it, but not completely done.
Let us know in the comments. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's something we could do in the future as new models.
Yep.
I don't know if they would necessarily replace the Mk13, but certainly in addition to the Mk13.
Yep. Okay. And that would certainly get us Brits excited having the latest.
Yep. Obviously.
British Army sniper rifle. As we'll probably go on to now, actually, as you've encountered, well, I think most countries will be pretty territorial in it and excited about the products their own armed forces used. But did you anticipate anything like the reaction you'd get to the L119A2 when that was announced?
That actually blew me away. We picked that gun because I'll profess that I'm a bit of a SAS fanboy. I know there's a lot of SOCOM fans and all the great U.S. Special Forces guys, but I think they have so much attention that basically anything they use gets reproduced in the airsoft world very, very quickly. I think the L119 is an absolute gem. I think other than XAO, and give them credit where credit is due, they did an excellent job with the kit, but it was not made for kind of like an everyday platform with the PDW. Is it PDW or PDS? PDW.
Personal training weapon.
Yeah. So if you base it on the system of PDW, I mean that's a very expensive base gun to begin with, and it's like you're talking about a niche within a niche. Yeah. So, and I'm like, well, what if I could make something like that, but make it more mass appeal, right? But another kind of setback of the design, because it's a monolithic upper, so that is very, very expensive.
Yeah.
We're kind of the volume that we have doing the other projects. So combined volume, we could ask our suppliers to give us a bit of a break. And we do it a little bit differently than how they did it. They machine it out of a billet. We use an extrusion, and then we machine from it. Obviously, there's a little bit of a trade-off, but honestly, for an airsoft gun, if I don't tell you, you probably would not know. But it's still very, very solid. And real guns are made that way all the time, by the way. So not everything's made, from 7075 forgings or billet.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of T6 stuff that's being used in the firearms world too. So anyway, that project basically came out from a discussion with our friends at GHK. Again, we're not new to the industry, so we know a lot of the different brands that we did work with and whatnot. And they were very supportive of the project. They're like, well, it's not something that we could do, mass produce, but yeah, if you guys want to do it, we'll happily supply you with the internals. And then obviously our friends at A+, they're not very well known outside of Taiwan, but the owner—
No, I've not heard of them before.
He's a very, very famous airsoft gunsmith, at least on the island. And when we told the locals that we're using that hop-up chamber, that's a $120 hop-up chamber inside the gun. That's $1,100. So again, it's kind of following our trend to put in more value to the system, because we don't want a wall queen. We don't want you to buy the gun, hang it on the wall, and never shoot it. We want people to use it and say, well, an Archwick gun is supposed to shoot a certain way. It's supposed to feel a certain way. So if I hit all those points, then I think we have a huge winner product on our hand.
What we're talking about is the L, and I'm sure a lot of you on the channel will know what this is already. This is my L119A2 that I built up from a GHK M4A1. The main thing we've mostly been having to do in the UK impressions community recently is this is a two-part gun. The fore end here and the receivers are completely separate. So there's actually a join line just about here. Now this one I spent 4 days with milliput and 3D prints. If you can see this, Nelson, I've got the bumps on my one.
Mm-hmm.
That's all. That's all 3D prints and epoxy sculpting putty. As well as having to have this machined. So this was machined down. I've got the dovetail on the back. I've got extra slots. I've got all the trades machined on and everything else, as well as having the barrel cut down. And then I had to do the sculpting work, and then it's got a separate angry gun rail on. So what Nelson's talking about with the monolithic upper is that the fore end and the upper receiver are one piece of metal. There's no joins. And that is a very, very difficult and expensive manufacturing process.
Each set of we talk about the upper. You know, we use a 5-axis CNC machine, so if you know what that is, it's kind of like high-end, very expensive machines, but they're so capable in a way because of the way they're able to turn the object and the actual, actually the head doesn't move, it goes up and down, but it's the way
the piece moves around,
the device moves around, and you get to certain angles that you would not be able to do with a 3 or 4-axis machine without, you know, taking it off and putting on the machine. It's just a very long process. But even with a high-end 5-axis machine, one upper takes 4 hours to do. So, you know, so I'm not talking about the lower, just the upper. And that's just the machining part, and then with to do all the other stuff, the engraving, you know, actually assemble and whatnot. So it is a very, very difficult gun to build. And, you know, I'm just guessing right now, but I think the kind of volume that we're doing it's a lot higher than what was previously done. Even just the number of kits available. You know, we're building. I could tell you this openly. We're building a couple hundred guns in the first batch, and they're basically all sold. And when I say all sold, not sold to end users, but we have distributors that we work with, and they actually prepaid. They want, you know, when I told them that I'm doing this, like, oh, we want this, and they're like, well, do you need more money to actually make this possible? I'm like, oh yeah, you know, just to buy the materials. So you know, we're kind of blessed that the success of the Mk13 allow us to gain a lot of trust with our distributors and our partners, and I'm very grateful for that. And they obviously help make this project possible. And you know, I reached out to your resident L119 gurus, and I asked them for feedback and whatnot. And I've learned a lot. I mean, you know, this is a real unicorn gun. Like, very few real guns have been touched by anybody in the public. Even with my connections and whatnot back in Canada, because this is a Coke Canada gun, the lowers are actually not in public hands. Nobody has seen one or touched one. I know that some of the uppers, there was a batch that was sent to Holland, I believe, that was somehow sent back to Canada.
There was a few civilian overruns, that went out into hands in Canada.
Yeah, but those got snapped up and no one would sell them. It is truly a unicorn gun. Like, honestly, it was relatively easy for me to get a hold of an AI chassis. But, you know, when we wanted, I'll tell you, I attempted to buy the upper, but because of COVID and whatnot, I never got my hands on it. So, you know, so I would admit that it was one of these projects that we ourselves never really got to handle a real one. But then again, we are very meticulous with our research. And I think, just like I said, we reached out to, you know, subject matter experts like Jay and Rich. You know, while they're very critical and they're very nitpicky, they also know their stuff. So, you know, I appreciate them their willingness to help, because I think this thing is very close to the heart for UK members.
It is.
Like I think,
a lot of the reason is we have to build them. You know, prior to you doing it, and I know there's another one coming out at the moment as well. Prior to you doing it, you had to make it. Even if you bought the kit from HAO, you had to make it yourself. There was no. It's a very personal. Every one of them is very personal to the person that's built it.
Well, the thing is, one thing that I kind of touched on is the hop-up unit. So I think a lot of the guys who build them, they just build them. They just want to look cool, take pictures and whatnot. I think it's so prized that they might not actually take them out to a field to use them. So one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is that the GHK hop-up adjustment is done on the forearm. So basically, like on a traditional M4, you remove the bottom, and then there's a dial you turn. With a monolithic upper, everything's locked in. There's nothing, you can't touch it, you can't reach it. So you're going to use the gun in one
Nelson. What Nelson's saying is on the traditional GHK, there's a hop-up arm which is in the base of the barrel, hit underneath here. Just like on a traditional CAC Riz Raz, you take the bottom section off, and there's a dial just on the base of the barrel here that you turn. Obviously, the Angry Gun barrel nut, which most people end up using, is about this long, and that completely covers that hop-up wheel. So this one, I've got the Maple Leaf hop-up unit, and with the entry, you can get into it from inside the receiver. Which is
what we're doing, but we just happen to choose one that's actually very well made, and it's I don't want to keep saying that it's very well made, but it's well made, plus it really performs. Like, I've shot guns there that have a similar hop-up system in it, and the way the rounds fly, it is just something different, you know. And I think you'll notice that with especially noticeable with GBBRs because of the recoil that they have.
Yep.
Way more recoil than an AAG. So again, our thing is we want the thing to look good, but we want you to be able to use it on the field. It has to shoot well as well, right? And that's probably something that you notice with the Mk13. People are like, oh, it can't shoot 80 meters out of the box. No, you can't.
Yeah, I got a 90-meter shot out there on 2.2 joules.
You got to drop it and you got to dial it in.
Yeah, I lobbed it in.
I'm
not lobbed. I was several targets high and it went in. If I was using heavy BB, the heaviest BB we had was 0.43. I probably could have got out to 100 with heavier ammo.
Yeah. So that's kind of part of our secret sauce. But again, back to the original question, I think there's a few people at first that said, "Well, it's too expensive." Then they start doing some research on what it costs to build one from a GHK and the amount of work, and then they realize that, okay, officially licensed, we do the work for you. We put in all these, little bits and bobs that are high end stuff. And when all things are considered, I think again we're trying to give you a lot of value for your money.
Personally, this one cost me the same as your retail price, but it's got a lot.
But you can put in your man hours.
I put all my man hours into it as well. Yeah, right. And your stuff will be more correct to the actual firearm anyway because you've spent the time.
I hope so.
Yeah, well, yeah. Well, this one definitely isn't because it's got milliput and platinum 3D prints on it. But it's a this is a good. I like to think it's a good example. But yeah. So you had some guys, you had some negative stuff. I think most of the community was pretty receptive, from what I saw.
Mm-hmm. Well, they're kind of a few people were pissed off that we're not selling a kit for a GHK. Well, you put in GHK guts in there. Why can't I? Because if I take what I pay for the guts and what you pay for the guts are something different, right?
Yeah.
So I'm able to offer a complete gun for a certain amount of money, but you take just the guts away, it doesn't really reduce the price as much as you think it would. No. So it just doesn't make sense. And there's also the problem of, GHK, like any other company, they would have periodic updates to their parts and whatnot throughout the years. So I can't, I could say GHK compatible, but I can't tell you, or I don't know what the donor gun is or how old it is or what condition it's in.
Yeah, and then you'd be dealing with warranty issues from a gun which might be 5 years old.
Right, and you can't get it to work, and the end user ends up getting pissed off at us because they go, "Oh, I got a GHK, but it won't fit," right?
Yeah.
It's kind of like that. So just to kind of branch off, even the MWS version that we're doing for the Japanese market, we basically told the distributor that we recommend, professional installation because there's gonna be some bits of grinding and fitting necessary to get it to work smoothly. I cannot control the tolerances of a donor gun. Again, Marui obviously it's a very well-known brand and they're known for the quality. But again, the condition of the donor gun is unknown.
Yep.
You could have a brand new gun, you have a 3-year-old gun, you have a gun that was made 5 years ago because the MWS system has been around for a long time. So that is kind of why that with the kits, we basically say hire a dealer or someone who is proficient with installations of a kit like this to do it for you. So yeah, that's it in a nutshell. And I'm again blown away by the response from at least the UK community. But a lot of people are actually looking for this gun even outside of the UK. Because,
we were
unicorn gun SAS, right?
Yeah, it's my small team, my small group. I've got some industry insiders in it, and we are plenty of people that work for other airsoft companies, and we have been amazed for several years since it came out, since 2016 when it was first seen. Why no one has made one, and they didn't even have to really license it. They could have just called it SAS rifle or something.
Right.
But I guess manufacturers looked at it and went monolithic upper.
I mean, I think even if you're doing thousands of these things, maybe you could bring it down to like a $600 mark for an AEG, but then that is still kind of expensive.
Top end.
Right?
I recorded an episode on Monday with some guys, and we were talking about airsoft replicas we would like to see made, and one of them that came up was the LMT 129 sharpshooter, which is the British 7.62 DMR rifle. Again, monolithic upper, and all of that kind of stuff. So that's
that is actually not as well known as the 119.
Yeah,
and I think. See, I'm a bit of a DMR fan right here. I got a VFC. This is basically a SCAR rifle, but the DMR version. So I would love to make something like this, but I think that's even harder to do than the 119. Like from a business point of view. Trying to recover your investment and whatnot. But maybe the 119 will sell so well that you guys will be begging me to make a 129. I hope that happens. Yeah,
me too.
I love to tackle that in the future. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
the episode was very much blue sky. Let's just what would we like? What we'd like to see. What made you go with the gas blowback platform for the L119?
Again, we're not really set up to do AEGs. With AEGs, it's kind of hit or miss. You either do it yourself or you buy a gearbox from somebody else, and it's hit and miss. I don't want to name names, but there are a couple brands out there that kind of do that. They make a very pleasing exterior, but the gearbox and stuff is just not as good. I wouldn't call it crap, but not up to par. There's no balance. It's too pretty, but the guts are bad. It's like having a really nice car with a very shitty engine.
Yeah.
Oh, I swore.
Okay, now makes sense. I think a lot of airsoft players aren't really they're not engineers or designers or retailers. They don't understand necessarily how the world works.
Yeah. Another thing too is actually GBBRs have been rising in popularity, at least locally, because we're in a very warm climate. But I think as an airsoft player, you kind of progress through different stages of your airsoft career. I mean, I did the same thing. In my day, there weren't no cheap China AEGs, right? Everybody bought Toku Marui, and then your typical spring upgrade, and you get a metal body and you build it up. Before you know, the gun is $1,000.
Yep,
so
easy.
When we started, it was you had to pay your way forward, and then as when we started playing, it was like when Counter-Strike first started, video games, right? And everybody, just want to have a kind of like that first shooter experience, and you end up posing a lot of ammo, and then as you get better as a player, you start doing limited ammo games, you start going for more realism, and I think where my company is now and where we are as business owners, and you tend to end up building things that you like yourselves.
Of course.
No knock on AEGs, but myself and Ray, we would not go near one. If I go play, I'm just beyond that stage now. It's like I'm looking for something different, and I think there's nothing wrong with AEGs. I think it's great that it allows new airsoft players to go in. Everybody starts out that way, but where we are, where we want to position ourselves and what we want to put out as products, I think GBBRs are the way to go. And another thing too, on the business sense, I know that you're actually in the airsoft buy and sell business, but dealers actually, at least locally, they're starting to like GBBRs more because there's more margins, because AEGs the margins are so thin.
Yes,
you have to sell 10 of them to make up what you would sell a higher end GBBR for. That's kind of like the numbers.
Yeah, we see it a lot. We see it a lot in the UK. I actually see it everywhere. There's a lot of companies with who will sell you a lot of accessories or aftermarket upgrades on your AEG.
Mm-hmm.
It makes good sense, but also that's where the margin is. It's like if you sell bicycles. If you sell high-end bicycles, there's very little margin. Everyone makes money on accessories and repairs and bike fits and everything else. That's where the cash is. That's where the cash is, really.
Yeah. So yeah, that's why we kind of chose what we chose.
There was some talk, I don't know where you are with it, about doing a Marui NGRS version.
We're actually starting to do the design phase of that, but how should I say this? The demand for the gun, the actual complete gun, and the MWS, it's already so high, because I think by the time we actually get to it, it'll probably be fall 2021. But we are actually working on it, and even though that's actually a good question. The kind of the Tokyo Marui versions, they have a milled lower as well, so that's
right.
We actually do a billet lower.
So you can't just buy just buy a lower off GHK. It's
no.
Okay. Yeah.
So people are wondering why they're both the same price, where one is a kit and one is a complete rifle. Well, the difference is you're not getting a billet machine lower. So there's also that kind of trade-off. But I think from what we do and what we offer, the trade-off is probably acceptable. So going back to your question, with the NGRS version, we're building from a billet, but the uppers have to fall in a certain dimension. And what we're noticing right now on when we took apart the NGRS, the walls on the lower receiver are actually very, very thin.
They are, yeah.
So there's literally like a millimeter of thickness on each side. So we have to do some torture testing to really see if that is acceptable. So we might actually end up having to machine the upper slightly fatter just to match it. I mean, to your eye, you wouldn't be able to see it, but we kind of have our baseline drawings to go from, and it would have to be a little bit bigger just to be on the safe side. So answer your question, we are working on it, but it's going to be put back.
Okay.
We also have other products to release. The L119 is not the only thing that we're making. So
well, let's talk about some of those. I think we've done the L119 to death. Though I know a lot of people watching this will be interested in the discussion we've just had. What are some of the other products you have planned that you'd like to talk about?
Obviously the SPR 300, and then the now I could call it the USW. I think we kind of skipped over that. That's actually coming out first. So
okay.
You probably see that in the next month or so. We are also doing an ODM project for another company, for another brand. So NDA stuff, I can't talk about that, but there's another gun kind of like slotted in between all these. It's nice that
it's great that other companies are now coming to you to do the work as well.
Well, we've always done that kind of work, or at least Ray did. So, it's now even, I guess, more attractive when he was just a designer. Now we have, the capability to give you a turnkey gun. So, that's something else that we also do. There's stuff going into 2022 that I kind of touched on with the G22. I wanted to do G22 for 2022. I don't want to make any promises because these things just never turn out the way you want. And with all the stuff that we're doing in 21, it might just kind of overlap into 22.
Yeah, sure.
So as far as this year is concerned, it's already packed. It's kind of funny that some of our suppliers that make parts for us, they're like, well, the other gun brands are all talking about you guys. Are like, you guys announce a lot of stuff. So can you actually come up with it? That's kind of like the question. So that's kind of the question that I have to answer. I could say with a lot of bravado, definitely, but there's always Murphy.
Yeah. Do you want to tell us a bit more about the SPR 300? I think some of my viewers, including myself, don't really know what it is. I had a brief look at the pictures, but do you want to tell us a bit more about that? Okay.
So that is basically to expand into kind of our kind of bread and butter, which is bolt action sniper rifles, to follow with the Mk13. The Mk13 is kind of like the L119 in a way. It's like half collectible, half for use. So the SPR 300, it's something that we want to build exclusively for use for basically skirmish reasons.
Okay.
the reason is the real SPR 300 is not adopted by any militaries, but B&T is a very famous brand. Anything B&T makes, like honestly, they don't make any products that are subpar. They might not sell in huge volumes, but if you have touched and fired and played with a real B&T any product, the quality will blow you away. So we like to think that we're doing them the honor of being able to kind of build something to the same quality levels as they put out. So the fact that they were so gracious in giving us the licensing, it shows a lot, because it's not like people think that you can make something and like a distributor like ASG or a license holder like them, and they would just automatically grant you license if you're willing to pay them a royalty. It's not like that. It's they have to know that you won't tarnish their branding. Yeah, so if you put out a subpar product, and they don't want their branding to be associated with this product. So obviously the Mk13 allowed us that avenue, because it opened the door for us. And that's why at MOA at the beginning they didn't say yes. They're like, okay, you can show it off, but we haven't got a definite answer yet from B&T. They're still kind of vetting you, and they have to look at the Mk13 and see how that turned out. And long story short, we're very grateful. This just happened yesterday. We were just told that they said yes. So going back to the original question, the SPR 300, it's a very compact rifle, relatively. I love the folding stock. The lines are very simple. Yeah. And we're doing it different than the real gun. The real gun, the chassis is machined billet. So we're doing a polymer chassis, right? So that makes it very light. So the entire gun is actually, I believe, if I'm not wrong, it's 2-point-something kilos. It's very, very light. So we're doing basically kind of putting some of the same parts that we're using for the Mk13. So you expect the same kind of quality. The trigger set is the same. Yeah. The piston is the same, but we're actually doing a 45 cc cylinder, which is very exciting. So a bore up size, a lot more air behind it. So we actually end up creating a longer version, which actually doesn't exist in the real world, to take advantage of the extra air volume. So this will definitely be a user's rifle. And again, we kind of touched on the dual mag system. Yeah. So now we're allowing users to, get a little bit of realism or more realism and versus, VSR10. But you decide what you want to use, right? And the thing is, the price point is lower, because the Mk13 is actually very complex to build. It's basically a metal chassis wrapped with all this plastic stuff that wraps around it. So off the top of my head, I think the SPR has half as many parts as the Mk13. Right. So it's kind of something that we're doing a higher volume on. It's kind of like our high volume seller, kind of, so to speak. And to my amazement, when I kind of didn't say it was the SPR 300, people who came up to in the show like, oh, that's the SPR 300. So people who know guns know it. I don't know if it's in any video games, but anything B&T. Actually, when my Japanese distributor found out that I'm doing this, he was over the moon, because B&T is a very well-liked brand in Japan, and obviously they just won a couple of contracts in the U.S. with the U.S. military. So I think they're a huge up-and-coming brand, like huge. Yeah. So I'm kind of glad. I'm already doing 2 of their products. Well, I would like to tell anybody that's watching to kind of be patient as we put out these products, because a lot of people keep asking, and I kind of gradually release details as we come along. A lot of people are asking, are there UK distributors and whatnot? Obviously, a bunch of the UK-based businesses have contacted us, but as I've already said on the video, basically everything in the first batch has already been spoken for. So I don't want to get involved with the wholesale side of things. We only deal with distributors. We don't actually deal with end users directly. So you would have to, all you guys watching the UK, you have to import yourselves into the UK, at least if you want in on the first batch. Yep. And then obviously we'll have a bit of an overrun that we could offer to various dealers in Europe. And Cybergun themselves might actually want it too. So even though they licensed to us, they're based in Europe. So we actually haven't spoken to them about it yet. E-Vike, it's going to have the L119 in the States. So this is actually global. So again, I just want to explain that we are trying to push out the products as soon as possible, but we're still a relatively young and small company, but it's a lot of stuff. So kind of funny when Jonathan from Airsoftology came by and interviewed us. So he says, this year is just you guys in VFC because of COVID and whatnot. The show is substantially smaller, basically half the size.
It was great that it ran. And a lot of, it was.
Yeah. So to be put in the same sentence as VFC, we're very honored. They're probably 20, 50 times bigger than us, right? So I'm not comparing myself to them by any means, but just to be able to kind of put out that kind of volume and interest in to you guys in the industry, we're very happy about that. And once again, thank you for all your positive feedback and your support. And we hope this will help us grow towards the future. Yeah. And when this stuff actually gets out and gets into UK hands, I'm sure any details that we missed and any flaws that it might have, we'll get an earful.
I think you're talking to the right guys, and anyone else probably is too far removed. But Nelson, I'd like to say a big thank you for coming on the show and talking to me today. It's been really great, particularly in these difficult times.
And thank you for having me. Yep.
Yeah, real pleasure.
So let's do this again in the future when the stuff's actually out.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, guys, thanks for watching. That's been another episode of AATV, this time with Archwick. If you want to help the channel stay as independent as possible, you can join our Patreon scheme. There are details in the description. If you want to make a one-off contribution, why not buy one of our T-shirts from Teespring? Again, details in the description. Most importantly, stay safe, and we'll see you soon.